some kind of shared value framework. Yes, of course, Professor Mohanty is the one who initiated this whole idea of creative theory. And there'll be always question mark. Is it creative theory, and are we thinking creatively? Do all variants of theory would have creative spaces and possibilities? Those are things which Professor Manoranjan and Professor Mohanty will also present to us. One dominant stream of thought which is part of creative theory we have learned over the years is that is liberating. I would also add, and I sincerely believe that most of the time the idea of liberation also comes as a part of modes of resistance. Maybe we can also add something more to that, deep human values. And these are very abstract values, we talk about it, but what I had in mind is, values of, say, paschatap, chama, also accepting all different viewpoints. And I do remember a long time back when there was this anti-Mandal agitation. Then there were Hindu forces. Professor Mohanty, that time, and that was very brave. He included all these thought processes, and he said, we need to engage with all these thought processes. We are not going to present those thought processes as something evil. We need to engage, we need to have a dialogue with them. And I think there were moments when we were very surcharged, we wanted to confront him and said, how can you even bring those forces? They're very reactionary. And he always asked us to be calm and patient and engage with those forces. So idea was to engage with all different shades of thought. We know that something 25 years back, when Dalit Bahujan discourse had just started, it wasn't the dominant theme. And Professor Mohanty, I do remember, I don't know whether you remember, in Delhi School Lawns, who said, we will have to hear Gopal Guru in years to come. And that was when he came and he gave this lecture in Delhi School of Economics. So those which were seen as alternative, even minor traditions, today they have emerged also as a dominant tradition. So creative theory actually soaks all these different viewpoints, vantage points, and makes it and enriches theoretical framework. Now, how to do it, Professor Mohanty and Professor Manoranjan. So I believe we have to start with Professor Mohanty over here. So.
Thank you. It's a beautiful morning, Teachers' Day, and a message from Randhir Singh, who has taught us to start with human life and human problems. I think theory doesn't come from abstract. Theory comes from concrete human problems around you, and from where you stand, look at the whole world, present, past, and future. So we are really in a great celebration. The time that we have crossed our schedule, so we should be. I should take about half an hour or 20 minutes.
20 minutes should be
20 minutes. Yeah. So 10:25. So at 15 minutes you indicate to me. Now, friends, it's a way of thinking. Creative theory is a way of thinking, and we are still evolving a perspective that addresses some of the uneasy feelings and dilemmas that we have encountered in using the categories that we have inherited. Some categories we have chosen to be more important, and we have relied on them, yet constantly trying to evolve new categories or enlarging or enriching those categories. So from that dissatisfaction, we try to look for alternative theoretical formulations. When one talks about creative theory, one talks about a view of history, a view of civilization as a history of human creativity and its process of unfolding. And civilization, in fact, civilization, the meaning of civilization itself is the collective arena of human creativity and its many manifestations. And if you took a longitudinal view in the total global space of the earth, then we would see the history of human creativity across millennia. So that also takes us to a view of the human as a creative being, that it's not just a physique, not just certain qualities. Of course, there cannot be a complete description or definition of a human. But one thing which is highlighted in the creative notion of the human is that human is a creative being, has creative potentialities which have been constrained by many institutions, structures, and processes. And we try to identify those institutions which have constrained the unfolding of that creativity of the human. And those of us who have seen that in the colonial period and the epoch of capitalism, and particularly in the capitalist creative understanding, when we saw that very powerful constraint is also the caste structure. And when we started this group, so some of you would remember, others have retired or not here, the class-caste connection, the class-caste interface. And then when we launched the gender studies program in our department, then the UGC took it up. So the class-caste gender interface showed us the multidimensionality of the institutional structures which have prevented unfolding of human creativity. And then when we saw Kashmir, Northeast, many other issues of nationality, then we began to wonder whether nationality is a concept as articulated during the anti-colonial context, or it has certain meaning that is unfolding. And from then on to today's many more constraints that we see, the sexual preference and so many other things, environmental constraints and so on. So the discovery of the interconnected institutional and structural constraints on human creativity, that was the starting point of several of us launching into this. And it took us to ask such questions to everything that we saw: family, religion, education, health, water, all these things. So it is, you would notice that creative theory is not definitional. Definition immediately encapsulates and constricts your imagination. So the textbook, the encyclopedia and the dictionary, they are the cumulative products. And we generally, all researchers start with definitions. The creative theory questions definitions. Just to give you an example of the creative exercise. It questions the cluster of characteristics of any institution, system, and so on. It opens up. A creative theory will always be developing. Therefore, one of the things about creative theory is it questions the inherited cluster of characteristics, because as teachers we define, we identify characteristics. But you will see from our practice that we have questioned definitions. We have questioned some characteristics of, let's say, Indian democracy. My generation found out characteristics of Indian democracy in a certain way. By the time we learned our mistakes of this literature, your generation was a little better off. And I'm sure you have taken it forward and your students are better than you were at one time. And so that process goes on. So questioning definitions and characteristics that constrict definitions is the beginning of creative activity, creative thought. Therefore, it is a dialectical process, and this is why the dialectical traditions, the comparing, contrasting, not dual. Dialectic always brings it to two, but it actually many twos, many dimensions of conflicts and contradictions we see, and therefore it is always moving. So it is dynamic. Creative theory always has a dynamic dynamism built into it, so today we have seen what were our constraints in knowledge, and now we are moving ahead. It is always geared towards transformation, change. That change may be restoring some of the good things of the past, but it is change. So transformative dimension is built into it, and this again I'm not identifying characteristics of creativity, please. These are elements, and we have to English language, this is why I like Ujjal's insistence that probably if we spoke in our mother tongue, we would have different ways of articulating. These are things that we have seen and we are still exploring. Dynamic, transformative, and it is one thing that always takes interconnections. And we started with class, caste, gender, ethnicity, nationality, language. It's dominating. Today the force of capitalism is so strong that we will tend to emphasize the centrality of class. But even in a capitalist-dominated system, if we forget the caste, gender, ethnicity, and religious minority, and all those dimensions, then we'll be ignoring reality very much. Now I will apply these ideas to an exercise of rights, and I've written and published on this, but I'll just mention three things. When Tilak said Swaraj is my birthright, it was a struggle affirmation. It was not a legal formulation given by the state or rulers or law recognizing a claim as right. So that statement liberated a whole discourse from the liberal tradition on theory of rights, and you have a beginning of a different tradition. And then you see, then when Gandhi talks about in Hind Swaraj, he talks about at least three things: a civilizational dimension of freedom, a political economy, the capitalism, Western capitalism and what it had done, the materialist, consumerist manifestation of Western capitalism, even in 1909. So civilizational, then capitalist political economy, and the third is that the kind of democracy that was practiced, the political system, but the corruption and lack of freedom in parliamentary democracy. All three dimensions he exposed as early as 1909, and he stood by that till the very end. And look at the Marxist analysis going on parallel, but there is no dialogue between the Hind Swaraj framework and the Marxist framework. And So when Bhagat Singh takes the anti-colonial framework and the Marxist framework together, you see these interconnections in some of the Bhagat Singh writings and slogans, particularly in the Socialist Manifesto. Ambedkar takes this even forward into focusing on thus far neglected dimension as a liberal. Here is a liberal parliamentary democracy theoretician and believer who says that, without social equality, political equality is meaningless. Much later, Lohia, I'm just giving you the modern Indian political thought to illustrate this, how the rights discourse evolves here in, Lohia takes all these things and puts it in the global framework. He's also a liberal, a social democratic thinker. But you see the interconnection affirmed of these dimensions. And Nehru, who comes from the Marxist, socialist exposure in Europe, England, he tries to mediate between this tradition and the Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, the capitalist modernized tradition. So it's a fantastic heritage of thought of a creative tradition. How many minutes more? 7 minutes. And this is the tradition which social movements in India question, uphold, extend, and make the rights discourse one of the richest theoretical and creative discourses in the modern world. The women's movement, the human rights movement, the environment movement, the Maoist movement, the tribal rights movement, the anti-caste movement, and the labor movement in various ways, anti-caste movement, etc. If you look at those of you who have studied many of these movements together, you see how notion of politics expands and the form of affirmation of that politics expands, and rights are claimed as political affirmations. Affirmations that is justifiable, that is justification of desirable human conditions. But seeking political affirmation through constitution, through law, and not being satisfied with that, continue the struggle to amend the constitution, have new laws, and you see that in practice those laws are neutralized or superseded by extraordinary laws or other laws. In other words, state is not the main guarantor of rights. State is also an arena of that political struggle. And therefore, we have a creative theory of rights which sees rights in course of struggle as political affirmations of desirable human conditions, which locates rights in struggle, not in a state and citizen negotiation where the rulers demand duties from citizens and give some concessions, rights as concessions. So the entire liberal political theory discourse on rights, which links it to state, links it to duty discourse, you take rights discourse away from that to the history of political struggles. Tilak, Gandhi, Ambedkar, Lohia, Nehru, that tradition. To social movements in India, how they have enriched the rights discourse. And human rights discourse or people's rights discourse even further. And they assert the right to give the meaning and expand it. And then the rights discourse becomes an arena of struggle, and the state decides to give us right-based development laws. The Narega, the right to education, and so on. And it's very interesting. Then we see whether rights are from above or rights are from below. Or it is a combination of the two. And so the interconnection and contestation. And the struggle goes on. So we have a theory of rights that is unfolding. It is creative because it is a product of struggle. It is not unilinear, it is dynamic. Several dialectical dimensions are unfolding in that. It is transforming society, and once the rights become the mainstay of even rulers' discourse, because they can't do it, they can't govern without conceding rights, they try to take hold of rights discourse and mold it in their way, and then people's movements seek to challenge. And the most important thing is they are dynamic and transformative in multidimensional way, interconnected way, not unidimensional way. This was the Puria discourse in the 80s. We insisted that it was multidimensional and interconnected. Therefore, you have many, many kinds of social, economic, cultural, and other rights in addition to political rights. Thank you very much.
See, always, especially if your teacher is sitting next to you, then you think, okay, you can't stop him. But, and Prof. Mohanty always keeps on telling you that, it's not definitional. But when you, especially if you have been trained to do that, when you look at this whole structure there, it's so neat, it's so packed, it becomes so organized. It's difficult. But also I was saying, see, it's creative theory one has to enjoy. One shouldn't be so, the way you speak, it's relaxed, it comes out from within. That's something. I've got one question, but we'll go to Professor Manoranjan Thakur, and then we'll come back to the question answer session. But something, I just want to, you always question this duty-based. I believe in Gandhi transformed and turned this rights to duty discourse and said it's our duty to resist unjust laws. And especially I know in prisons he basically said, he very clearly said that if you defy the laws over there, you must suffer the punishment. And then he turned the whole duty. And I think to some extent whatever we learned through Balagopal, if we don't use the term duty and we say responsibility, and responsibilities are not only official responsibilities. Responsibilities we take anywhere, right? Whether it's family, whether it's community, whether it's organization, everywhere. So how do you combine responsibilities with rights discourse? Because that's important, we have to engage. I do remember, again way back, I don't even remember the year, but you said where we have to move beyond criticism. Critique is not just criticism. You have to take responsibilities, you have to engage, and you have to transform, you have to come with something new. And I think that's the spirit of creative theory. So we'll come back to this discussion, but before Professor Manoranjan Thakur, my apologies, Professor Mohanty's, the title of his paper was A Creative Theory of Rights, and Professor Thakur's paper is on democratic negotiation.